You are standing in the middle of an open stretch of land, looking down at a nest on the ground. 4 eggs as big as melons, neatly arranged on a pile of dry leaves. A week's worth of meals right there, just 3 steps away from you. All you have to do is bend down, pick them up, and bring them back. The simplest meal nature could possibly give you. There is one small problem. The animal that laid those eggs weighs 1.5 times more than you, stands nearly 2 meters tall, has 10-centimeter claws on each foot, runs twice as fast as you, and is watching you from 20 meters away with a pair of eyes that are anything but friendly. It is not afraid of you. It has no reason to be afraid of you. It is a finely tuned fighting machine evolved over millions of years to protect one single thing, the nest you are looking at. And you are a naked primate with no claws, no fangs, no armor, trying to steal the most valuable thing it has. So how did your ancestors do it? How did they manage to take eggs from nests like this millions of times over tens of thousands of years without getting killed? And the answer? It was not just one thing. It was never just one thing. Before talking about how they took the eggs, let us talk about why they had to take the eggs. Because if you only look at the risks, getting kicked, pecked, clawed, or killed, then no sane person would go poking around the nest of an animal that wants to tear you apart. But they did. They did it constantly. They did it everywhere on the planet, on every continent where people lived, for hundreds of thousands of years. And the reason is very simple. Eggs are one of the most perfect food packages nature has ever created. Think about this for a moment. One egg contains exactly everything needed to turn a single cell into a complete animal with bones, muscles, a brain, eyes, and fur. Protein, fat, vitamins, minerals, water, all packaged in a hard shell that you can carry with you. No need to chase anything. No need to kill meat. No need to skin, debone, or worry about the meat spoiling before you finish eating. Eggs are food that nature has already prepared for you. And not all eggs are the same. Duck eggs contain more vitamin B12, vitamin D, and omega-3 than chicken eggs of the same size. Goose eggs have significantly higher fat and protein content. Ostrich eggs are equivalent to 18 to 24 chicken eggs in volume, weighing about 1.5 kilograms. One single egg is a meal for the whole group. Beatrice DeMarchi, archaeologist and biologist, says it straight. Ostrich eggs are nutrient-rich, clean, and extremely easy to transport. That is not a marketing comment. That is a conclusion from the archaeological record. In South Africa, at Deep Kloof Rock Shelter, archaeologists found ancient fireplaces dated 60,000 years ago, scattered full of ostrich eggshells. Not a few scattered pieces, hundreds of pieces. The Middle Stone Age people there ate ostrich eggs so regularly that the shells became everyday household trash. And this is not the only discovery. In Tanzania, ancient hominid footprints were found right next to francolin nests, a type of ground nesting forest chicken. Archaeologists cannot prove it with a time machine, but they are quite confident that those hominids raided francolin nests for eggs. Further back, lower Paleolithic humans collected eggs in the forest along with seafood, fruit, and nuts. That means our egg-raiding behavior may go back millions of years. And in Australia, archaeologists found pieces of Genyornis eggshell, a giant flightless bird weighing more than 200 kilograms, with characteristic burn marks dated more than 50,000 years ago, proving that early humans roasted and ate eggs from this species over campfires right from the time they first set foot on the continent. For millions of years, humans risked their lives to bend down and pick up one egg. Why? Because it was the thing most worth risking on Earth. Eggs were not convenient food. Eggs were an invitation that evolution did not allow you to refuse. But evolution is not a generous giver of free gifts. It placed a perfect nutrient package in the middle of nature, then handed it to an animal ready to die to protect it. And when we say ready to die, we mean ready to kill. Let us start with the cassowary, because if there is one bird species you should not provoke, this is it. The cassowary, the rainforest ostrich, weighs nearly 70 kilograms, stands nearly 2 meters tall, cannot fly but can run 50 kilometers per hour and jump higher than 2 meters. Each foot has 3 toes, with the middle toe bearing a 10-centimeter dagger-shaped claw. Christina Douglas, anthropologist at Penn State, says it straight. This is not small poultry. It is a giant, aggressive, flightless bird that can disembowel you, and she is not exaggerating. A captive cassowary in Florida killed its owner. Another killed a teenager in Australia in 1926. They are the closest living relatives of the velociraptor, and they behave exactly like their relatives. The males protect eggs and chicks so aggressively that even the New Guinea natives, who have lived alongside cassowaries for tens of thousands of years, consider taking down an adult a rare piece of luck. On average, a hunter is lucky to kill one every 5 years. They are fast, they are alert, and they do not run when threatened, they attack. But the cassowary is just the beginning. The ostrich, the largest bird in the world, 150 kilograms, running 70 kilometers per hour, protects its nest by kicking. And an ostrich kick is not the kind where you get hurt and stand back up. A medical paper on PubMed Central describes the case of a 71-year-old man kicked in the abdomen by an ostrich, the force strong enough to perforate the small intestine, requiring emergency abdominal surgery. And the ostrich does not stop when you fall. It keeps kicking while you are already lying on the ground. The only recommended defense tactic if chased by an ostrich is to lie face down on the ground and cover the back of your neck with both hands until it leaves. If you need a more specific image, Johnny Cash, yes, that Johnny Cash, once got kicked by an ostrich. It did not end well for Mr. Cash. Now let us go to the water. The saltwater crocodile, the largest living reptile, 4 to 5 meters long, protects its nest with a level of aggression few other reptiles can match. The female stays right next to the nest throughout the incubation season, and when you get close, it does not warn, it attacks. And then there are seabirds. You might think seabirds are harmless, small, flying, fish-eating. Wrong. Seabirds protect their nests with a collective tactic called mobbing. Dozens, hundreds of them diving down at once, pecking heads, pecking eyes, dropping feces, and in the case of the fulmar, spraying a type of stomach oil on the intruder that, if it gets on a predator bird's feathers, destroys its waterproofing and causes it to fall to its death. Even geese and swans, the birds you see in parks that look gentle, become extremely aggressive during nesting season. Swans have broken people's arms. Canada geese have chased and defeated more adults than you think. And there are species that defend with intelligence rather than violence. The killdeer, a coastal bird, performs a broken wing act when a predator approaches the nest, pretending to be injured, dragging itself across the ground to lure the enemy away, then flying off when at a safe distance. The hoatzin in the Amazon is different. Flightless chicks jump straight into the water when threatened, using claws on their wings to swim to safety then climb back up the tree. Each species has one tactic, each tactic a different problem that the egg thief must solve. Every egg on this planet has a bodyguard, and that bodyguard is not paid, it works for its genes. So if the defenders are that dangerous, what was the first weapon of humans? It was not a club, it was not fire, it was not a stone, it was information. More specifically, it was the calendar. Australian Aboriginal people developed incredibly detailed seasonal calendar systems, from 4 seasons in northwest Victoria to 6 seasons in Arnhem Land, with some groups even dividing into 13 seasons. Each season not only marked weather changes, but precisely marked when which species bred, when eggs appeared, when the mother left the nest to forage, when was the safest time to approach. They used the positions of stars to determine seasons, and the seasons told them when to go collect eggs. Wrong timing meant arriving where eggs had not been laid yet or had already hatched, or worse, arriving right when the mother was at peak protection. Right timing meant food for a whole week without spilling blood. Many Aboriginal communities used the heliacal rising, the first appearance before dawn of specific stars to mark when which bird species began laying eggs, when fish entered the rivers, when fruit ripened on the trees. Stars were not just for navigation. Stars were ecological calendars. Look at how saltwater crocodile eggs are harvested in the Northern Territory, Australia. Saltwater crocodiles lay eggs during the rainy season, and the nests must be harvested before floodwaters rise and submerge the eggs. The time window is extremely narrow. Too early, the female is still guarding the nest most aggressively. Too late, the water washes everything away. Indigenous rangers today still use traditional seasonal calendars to determine the exact timing for locating and approaching nests. That knowledge is not a modern invention, it has been passed down for thousands of years, but perhaps the most impressive example of timing knowledge comes from New Guinea. Christina Douglas and colleagues at Penn State analyzed more than 1,000 pieces of cassowary eggshell from 2 rock shelters in eastern New Guinea, dated from 6,000 to 18,000 years ago. They developed a new method using 3D microscopy to determine the age of the embryo at the time the egg was harvested. The results published in PNAS in 2021. The vast majority of eggshells showed eggs harvested at a very late embryonic stage, when the embryo already had fully formed legs, beak, claws, and feathers. Douglas says the eggshells look very late. The pattern is not random. That means ancient people not only knew when cassowaries laid eggs, they knew what developmental stage the eggs were in. They were either eating balut, fertilized eggs with nearly hatched embryos, or deliberately incubating to raise chicks. Both possibilities require astonishingly precise knowledge of the reproductive cycle of a bird species that could kill them. On the other side of the world, the same principle. The Ahoset First Nation in British Columbia, Canada, harvests seabird eggs 3 times in a single week in the month of June, and only take 1 out of every 3 eggs per nest. In Iceland, the Langanese cliffs are divided into sectors, each harvested 2 to 3 times during the laying season, then left alone for the birds to incubate the next round. This is not looting, this is resource management, and it starts with knowing exactly when to come and when to stop. The first weapon was not a club or fire, it was the calendar. But knowing when to come only solves half the problem. The other half, when you get there, what do you do with the animal guarding the nest? And the answer our ancestors figured out very early is that you do not do it alone. You never do it alone. Australian Aboriginal people harvest saltwater crocodile eggs in teams. Saltwater crocodiles are apex predators, 4 to 5 meters, with the strongest bite force in the animal kingdom, and the females protect their nests with extreme aggression. You cannot drive a female crocodile away from its nest by going there alone and telling it to move. You need a group. One group distracts the female, draws its attention away from the nest, while another group quickly takes the eggs. Coordination, role division, synchronized execution sound familiar. It sounds like military tactics because it is military tactics, only the target is not a fortress but a pile of eggs on the riverbank. On the other side of the world, group coordination looks different, but the principle is exactly the same. On the Faroe Islands, in the middle of the North Atlantic, people harvest fulmar eggs from vertical cliffs hundreds of feet high. One person ties himself with traditional wool rope, wears wool slippers, and is lowered down the cliff. The others stay on top, operating the rope, communicating by radio, watching every move. The one below collects the eggs, the ones above keep the one below alive. No radio, no rope, no second person, you die. In Iceland on the Langanes Peninsula, a similar system. Jan is the one lowered down the 400-foot cliff. Samandur operates the 4x4 vehicle holding the rope, continuous radio communication. When Jan is pulled up, the two sort the eggs right there. Smaller, more fragile kittiwake eggs into cardboard boxes, guillemot eggs into large plastic bins. Then the eggs are washed and candled to check if they are developing embryos. You see that process? That is not picking fruit from a tree. That is a complete logistics chain, and it requires at least 2 people who trust each other with their lives. But perhaps the most extreme example of collective scale in egg harvesting comes from the Farallon Islands, off the coast of San Francisco. In 1849, when the California gold rush exploded, the city had a severe protein shortage. Hundreds of people poured onto the Farallon Islands, home to the largest seabird nesting population in the United States outside Alaska, to harvest murre eggs. They climbed sharp rocks, scaled vertical cliffs, endured hundreds of seabirds attacking collectively, collected thousands of eggs per trip, and brought them back to San Francisco to sell for prices equivalent to thousands of dollars today. A pharmacist named Robinson and his brother, on their first trip, pocketed $3,000 in 1849. The news spread fast, and almost overnight, the island was packed with egg collectors. The Farallon Islands at that time had the largest seabird nesting population in the United States outside Alaska. Every spring, hundreds of thousands of birds covered the island with eggs of every color, shape, and size. Seabirds defend collectively, hundreds diving down at once, pecking heads, dropping feces, screaming. And humans responded collectively too, one person shielding, another picking, another transporting. One single human in front of a nest is prey. A group of humans in front of a nest is a harvesting team. But group coordination only solves the problem when you can approach the nest by normal land travel. Many bird species had solved the egg thief problem long before humans appeared, by nesting in places that almost no one could reach. Vertical cliffs hundreds of meters high over the sea, rocky outcrops jutting into the ocean, offshore islands where no land predators could set foot. And this is what seabirds did not count on. Humans can climb, humans know how to use ropes, humans know how to build boats. Cape Enneberg in the Faroe Islands rises 754 meters above the North Atlantic, one of the highest sea cliffs in the world. No fox can climb it, no weasel can crawl it, no snake can slither it. But the Faroese people could climb it, and they have been climbing for hundreds of years to take fulmar and puffin eggs from ledges that only birds use. At Bempton Cliffs on the northeast coast of England, the cliffs rise 400 feet. For many centuries, local people known as climbers, Yorkshire dialect for climbers, lowered themselves down these cliffs on ropes to harvest tens of thousands of guillemot eggs each year. They knew every ledge, every nesting nook, every spot where the rarest eggs lay. And they passed that knowledge down through many generations. At St. Kilda, a remote archipelago off the northwest coast of Scotland abandoned since 1930, the residents operated a cliff exploitation system so organized it was almost industrial. The annual schedule was clearly divided by species. Kill gannets and shearwaters in April, harvest puffin eggs and catch fulmars in May, trap puffins in July, catch fulmars and gannets in August, catch young gannets in September. This was not chaos, it was production planning. Think about this seriously for a moment. A small community on a rocky island in the middle of the Atlantic, living or dying depending on the ability to climb cliffs in the right month to take the right type of egg from the right bird species. And they did it long enough to develop schedules, procedures, and division of labor. But cliffs were not the only terrain humans exploited. Ostriches nest on flat ground in open savanna, and that very openness was the advantage. Hunter-gatherers could spot the ostrich from far away, observe when it left the nest, and approach during the window when the male went to find water or food. In Tanzania, francolins, ground forest chickens, nest right on the forest floor. The nests were easy to access when the mother went foraging, and humans had been exploiting that since leaving footprints next to nests millions of years ago. And then there was the island strategy. Many seabird populations nest on offshore islands, places where no foxes, snakes, or wild cats could reach. Birds chose islands for safety from land predators, but humans built boats. Humans rowed out to the islands. Humans turned the birds' safest places into the most convenient harvesting sites for themselves. Birds had solved the problem of protecting eggs from every enemy except one. Humans were not stronger than the nest guard, but humans could go where the nest guard could not go. There is one thing humans figured out before figuring out almost everything else, and it completely changed how we interact with every egg nest on the planet: fire. The fear response to fire in animals is instinctive, not learned, not from experience, but hard-coded evolutionary programming written over millions of years of wildfires. Animals that feared fire ran from the flames and survived. Those that did not, did not. That fear runs so deep that laboratory animals that have never seen fire still avoid it when they smell smoke. Humans discovered fire somewhere between 1 and 2 million years ago. And in the context of egg raiding, fire was a multipurpose weapon. Smoke drove birds off cliff nests, torches kept reptiles at bay, and firelight at night allowed approach to nests when the defender had limited vision. You did not need to fight the animal. You just needed to make it go somewhere else. Fire first. A smart move, honestly, but fire was only the first technology. With ostriches, the most specific defense strategy was using a branch of thorny acacia tree as a shield. Ostriches kick forward and downward, with sharp claws on the largest toe. It keeps kicking even when you are lying on the ground. You cannot outrun it, 70 kilometers per hour, forget it. But a large enough acacia branch held between you and it creates a barrier it does not want to kick through. Acacia thorns are sharp, long, and enough to make a 200-kilogram bird hesitate. That was not a weapon. That was psychological warfare. And after getting the eggs, you needed something to carry them back. This is when the story really gets interesting. Go back to Diepkloof Rock Shelter in South Africa, the same site where Middle Stone Age people ate ostrich eggs 60,000 years ago. But the aspect the previous part did not mention. Archaeologists found 408 pieces of ostrich eggshell deliberately engraved with patterns, not random scratches but repeating geometric designs, with two main motifs, one using cross-hatched bands and one using nearly parallel lines. The eggshells were pierced at the top using drilling, chiseling, grinding, or smashing techniques, and used as water containers. Recent Kalahari hunter-gatherers still do the same, eat ostrich eggs, then turn the shells into water bottles and bead necklaces. The engravings on the Diepkloof containers were not decoration. According to archaeologists, they were ownership marks or content indicators, part of a complex symbolic communication system. Do you understand what that means? 60,000 years ago, humans turned eggshells from meal waste into water storage technology, ownership marking systems, and a foundation for symbolic communication. Eggs were not just food, their shells were the first water bottles. On the other side of the world, egg processing techniques were no less sophisticated. Chinese century eggs, preserved in a mixture of clay, ash, salt, quicklime, and rice husks for weeks to months, turned perishable fresh eggs into long-term storage products. Balut in Southeast Asia, late-stage embryo eggs boiled and eaten, required harvesting at the exact developmental stage, not too early and not too late. Humans did not invent eggs. Humans invented ways to turn eggs into systems. Everything just said above is true, under normal conditions. The right knowledge, the right timing, a large enough group, the right tools, the system worked. But this video would be irresponsible if it did not say straight out that the system was not foolproof. It broke. And when it broke, the consequences were very real. A captive cassowary in Florida killed its owner. A man who had raised it for many years, knew its personality well, and still got taken down. In Australia in 1926, a teenager was fatally attacked by a cassowary. In both cases, the safety distance was breached. Not because of lack of knowledge. Sometimes it was just one wrong step, one wrong approach angle, one moment of lost focus. Cassowaries do not give second chances. Ostriches are the same. A medical case on PubMed Central. A 71-year-old man, one kick to the abdomen, small intestine perforated, emergency surgery. He was not a naive tourist. He was on an ostrich farm. He knew the animal. But knowing the animal did not mean the animal would not kick you. One kick at the wrong time, wrong angle, wrong distance. That was all it took. And that was not the only case. People had shared living space with ostriches for thousands of years, and hunting along with egg harvesting certainly created countless dangerous encounters that history did not record. More recently, commercial ostrich farms in Africa, Australia, and even the United States dramatically increased the risk of attacks because the density of contact was much higher than in nature. But perhaps the most striking example of when the egg rating system collapsed did not come from animals attacking humans, but from humans attacking humans. The Farallon Islands, San Francisco, in the middle of the 19th century. When news of the huge profits from murre eggs spread, hundreds of people poured onto the island. Competition turned into conflict. Conflict turned into violence. In 1863, a real battle broke out on the island between competing egg-collecting groups. There were guns, there were casualties. The United States government responded by granting a monopoly to the Pacific Egg Company, but the company grew increasingly aggressive, threatening lighthouse staff, attacking anyone collecting eggs without permission, even demanding the removal of the foghorn because it scared the birds away. Finally, in 1881, the United States Army had to forcibly evict the company from the island. You read that right. The United States Army intervened in a war over bird eggs. The Pacific Egg Company had even attacked a lighthouse employee just because he collected a few eggs for his personal meal. That was the final straw before Washington acted. And throughout decades of exploitation, the seabird population on the Farallones suffered catastrophic decline. Hundreds of thousands of birds, millions of eggs, and an ecosystem devastated because humans did not know when to stop. The rule here is consistently terrifying. The egg harvesting system worked when three conditions were maintained: accurate knowledge, disciplined harvesting, and respect for the reproductive limits of the exploited species. The Ahuset took 1 out of every 3 eggs per nest. The Icelanders harvested 2 rounds then stopped. Australian Aboriginal people followed traditional seasonal calendars. The system broke when one of the 3 conditions failed. Greed replaced discipline, inexperience replaced knowledge, or harvesting pressure exceeded the population's ability to recover. Every egg your ancestors took was a winning bet. But not every bet wins, and now for the part no one saw coming. Because it turns out humans were not just good at taking eggs without getting attacked. Humans were so good they ate an entire giant species into extinction. Genyornis newtoni, Australia. A flightless bird more than 2 meters tall, weighing 220 to 240 kilograms, laying eggs the size of melons weighing about 1.5 kilograms. It lived in Australia alongside an astonishing collection of megafauna: 100-kilogram kangaroos, 2-ton wombats, 7-meter lizards, marsupial lions, Volkswagen-sized turtles. Then humans arrived, around 65,000 years ago, and Genyornis disappeared. Gifford Miller at CU Boulder and colleagues found Genyornis eggshells with characteristic burn marks at more than 200 sites across the Australian continent. The dates, from 53,900 to 43,400 years ago, most likely before 47,000 years. The burn marks were not from wildfires. The heat gradients on the eggshells were inconsistent with natural fire but consistent with humans roasting eggs over small campfires and discarding the shells around them. Miller says, "We could not find any scenario in which wildfire could produce such massive heat gradients." In 2022, ancient protein analysis by teams from Cambridge and Turin confirmed the eggs belonged to Genyornis, not Pagura, a much smaller bird that some scientists had proposed. Humans did not need to hunt adult Genyornis. No spears, no traps, no confronting a 200-kilogram bird. They only needed to raid eggs often enough to drop the reproduction rate below the level that compensated for natural mortality. And over a few thousand years, mathematics did the rest. Emu eggshells, the large bird species still alive in Australia, also began showing burn marks at the same time as Genyornis shells, and continued to the present day. That means humans raided eggs from both species at the same time, but emus were smaller, laid more, and recovered faster. Genyornis was larger, laid fewer, and could not compensate for the losses. 85% of Australian animals weighing over 45 kilograms went extinct not long after humans arrived. We did not need to kill the bird, we only needed to take its eggs long enough. Let us go back to that nest. 4 eggs as big as melons, lying on a pile of dry leaves, in the middle of an open stretch of land. The animal that laid them is still watching you from 20 meters away. It still weighs 1.5 times more than you. It still has 10-centimeter claws. It still runs twice as fast as you. Nothing has changed except you, because now you know what your ancestors knew from thousands of generations ago. You know which season it lays. You know which embryonic stage gives the highest nutritional value. You know when it leaves the nest to drink water and how many minutes you have before it returns. You know who will distract, who will pick the eggs, who will keep watch. You know which tree branch will shield against its kick. You know from which direction the smoke will make it leave. And you know that the egg in your hand is not just a meal, its shell will become a water bottle, a bead necklace, a surface to engrave ownership marks. You know all of that because millions of years ago, a naked primate stood in front of an identical nest with the exact same fear, and instead of walking away, it observed, it waited, it learned, it taught its children, and the children taught their children. And so on through thousands of generations until raiding nests was no longer a reckless behavior but became a system, with calendars, with teams, with tools, with rules, with limits. The simplest looking food on the planet turned out to require the most complex thing any species could develop: intelligence accumulated over time, passed on through language, executed through cooperation. And we became so good at it, that nest over there, with eggs as big as melons, from a giant bird weighing more than 200 kilograms, it no longer exists. That bird no longer exists. We ate it into extinction, not with spears, but by picking its eggs. That is you. That is your species. The species that turned every nest on the planet into a problem and solved it. You just watched how humans turned an egg nest into a system. If you want to see more about what the toughest species on the planet did to survive in a world that wants to eat it, hit subscribe, because this is just one egg in a dozen stories waiting.